Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschatya Satarine Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Srivasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare. In anticipation of a festival that's going to be occurring next week, Dussehra or Ram Vijayotsava, the destruction of Ravana at last, uh, is a festival that'll be celebrated by our ISKCON centers around the world, and I'm sure also here in Potomac Temple. So last week and this week, the topic I selected was in anticipation of that event, victory of Ram over Ravana. And last week the topic was victory, but at what cost? So we discussed Bharata, who achieved victory of the entire world, but at what cost? And this week our topic is similar but different. Victory, our victory, in contrast with others' victory. So because it's Ram Vijayotsava, I thought of spending some time with a topic from Ramayana that helps us understand something that's very valuable in our devotional life. That is making a very clear sense of mission and purpose and way of life in our life of devotion to the personality of Godhead, to dedicate ourselves in a very focused manner, not just for our victory, but for another's victory. Here in Washington, D.C., the presidential election is taking many people's attention and energy all over the country and, for that matter, around the world. And as we heard last week, sometimes people will do anything to get victory with that focus, and there may be costs along the way. But what is that person who is interested in others' victory? We may become so focused that we just leave to the side the importance of others being victorious. So we're going to take some lessons this evening from Ramayana and guiding our lives in practical ways, how to place others' victory as the mission of our victory. In this case, the topic is going to be Vishvamitra. And Vishvamitra was taking as his purpose the victory of Ram in many ways. The life of Vishvamitra is very complicated, very involved. And in the course of his becoming Vishvamitra Muni, he, towards the very beginning of his life as a king, the son of a Kshatriya family and dynasty, he received all celestial weapons. He was very well equipped with those celestial weapons to deal with anybody and anything. Plus, from his austerities, he had Brahminical power, and he was not an incapable person by any means. The scene opens with Vishwamitra coming to Ayodhya just at the same time when Dasarath was considering the importance of the marriage of his 4 sons. Now, in Vedic culture, sons and daughters were married at a much earlier age than our present day. Ram and his brothers were 12 years of age, but Dasarath was aged. He had been ruling for 60,000 years before his sons were born, and he was concerned in his old age that his son should have a proper situation as the next ruling family. There's an important underlying spiritual hint. When great personalities, in this case Dasarath, is contemplating something that's very important for the well-being of the world, at that time, it's not uncommon, it happens in our Vedic culture, that great personalities will suddenly arrive. The spiritual master or guide for those personalities will arrive and give the appropriate instruction. One nice example in this case is Vyasadeva, after compiling all the Vedas and considering, as he did, how the outcome of his compilation work came, and feeling not satisfied, Nard appeared just at the right moment. And there's many other examples. We'll get right back to this narration, but there's a principle. Great personalities contemplating the welfare of the world and others, victory of others. At that time, Krishna sends, appropriately, commonly, often, a great personality to guide these individuals. In this case, Vishwamitra is serving like guru for Dasarath. He's requesting some service of Dasarath, as we'll hear shortly. But he's coming for the benefit of Dasarath. It's Dasarath's benefit. And the victory not only of Dasarath and Ramchandra and so many other personalities we'll hear as we go along. Vishwamitra, as elevated as he was placing the interests of others above his interest and was very, very, very focused. It's not easy to be focused on the interest of others in the course of achieving your purposes in life. That's the lesson here. The Sri Vaishnava Acharyas have abundant commentary about a prelude set of events that took place just before Vishwamitra's visit. In Ayodhya, there was the contemplation of marriage for the 4 sons of Dasarath. In Mithila, there was another contemplation, the contemplation of the marriage of Sita, and considerations are being made on what would be an appropriate Swayamvar ceremony for this most exalted daughter of King Janak, born the way she was born and showing the qualities that she showed in her childhood. And Janak, being a Mahajan, understood her exalted nature and many other nice things. This very special arrangement was made, the Swayamvar festival, for lifting and stringing the bow of Lord Shiva. There's a long history of how that bow of Lord Shiva got in the care of King Janak, but that was the plan. And chief priest of King Janak's court was Shatananda. Shatananda was the son of Gautama Rishi, and the ashram of Gautama Rishi was not far from King Janak's capital. Shatananda became his chief priest. So Shatananda, being most elevated personality, had two concerns. One, he knew that Sita and Ram are eternal associates, and he wanted to see the combination of Sita and Ram. And two, he wanted the deliverance of his mother Ahalya, because a curse had been given by Gautama to his wife and to the mother of Shatananda, that she would become a rock until the personality of Godhead, Lord Ramachandra, came, placed his foot upon that rock, and then that curse would be lifted, and Gautama would return, and things would be nice again. So Shatananda knew all these things. And it doesn't give the detail, but somehow that inspiration of Shatananda was communicated to Vishwamitra. Vishwamitra gladly accepted the function of arranging for Ram to come to Mithila to attend this bow festival and win the hand of Sita. And something that's described elsewhere, not directly in Valmiki Ramayana, but this same Vishwamitra, who was the matchmaker or the go-between, the arranging for the marriage of Sita and Ram, later in Krishna's pastimes, he became that Brahmana who carried the message from Rukmini to Krishna. And in Gaura Lila, the same personality became the arranger for the marriage, the matchmaker arranger for the marriage of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, Nimai Pandit, and Lakshmi Devi, Lakshmi Priya. So that's of service to the personality of Godhead. And Vishwamitra, being very wise, he understood that the marriage, Ram is just a young fellow. Specifically, Ram was 12. And he didn't have the credential. His powers were unknown to the world. And so Vishwamitra had an idea that in order to, before bringing Ram to Mithila, he wanted to show to the world and show to King Janak and all the other kings that Ram was a worthy husband to be for Sita. He wanted Ram to show his power, which he knew he had the power, and with Vishwamitra's support he would be victorious. And then when coming to this bow festival in Mithila, he would be honored by King Janak. On that's the background to Vishwamitra's visit to Ayodhya. So when Vishwamitra came to Ayodhya, he didn't come with the whole entourage. The other sages would sometimes come with the whole entourage of their followers. He came alone. And when he came to the gate outside Dasara's city, Ayodhya, there was a gatekeeper. And Vishwamitra informed the gatekeeper who he was. When he requested audience with the king, he identified his lineage. He's the son of Gadi, and in the line of Kaushik Rishi, or Kushik Rishi, thus known by Kaushika, in the lineage of a great sage. So it's part of Vedic culture. It's a small but important cultural point. Persons, when introducing themselves or being introduced by others, will often explain the ancestry, the lineage of greatness of that personality. And that's how Vishwamitra introduced himself. We find similar reference like that when Krishna is speaking to Arjuna. He often addresses Arjuna according to his lineage, invoking the greatness of the person and also the remembrance of that person of how they are to represent that lineage. Now, in our case, the ISKCON devotee group listening to this class, we also have some heritage to hold up to live up to bring honor to. So when we're considering our activities that are common, what to speak of something that's very critical, we need to invoke remembrance of those who we are representing, the great personalities in our disciplic line that we're to properly represent. So a messenger went to the king. Dasarath, hearing Vishwamitra is at the gate, he didn't just send a messenger, he came himself. And when they came into the royal palace, there's a very celebrated verse that Prabhupada would speak often, so many times. Purnar Janma Jayaya, this word victory, Jayaya. Jaya means victory. So Dasarath, the first words were spoken by Dasarath to receive Vishwamitra. And he asked him, how are your austerities going? How are your efforts proceeding to achieve victory over birth and death? Because great personalities, what do they have to achieve in worldly matters? Kshatriyas, they're also great personalities, but they have kingdoms to protect and personalities to serve. So those were the questions that Vishwamitra asked of Dasarath. A whole series of such questions. Are your duties to the demigods going nicely? Are the persons who are in opposition to you, are they in proper check? Yeah. Are the neighboring kings in good relations or in enmity with you? So naturally, inappropriately, Vishwamitra is addressing the king corresponding to his situation. This is a cultural point. And from there, after those exchanges with Dasarath, he then proceeded to Vishishta, and in descending order, other celebrated rishis and personalities in Dasarath's ministry, those who were giving advice and guidance to the king. Now, that Vishwamitra's name means he's the mitra or friend of Vishva, the universe. So when Vishwamitra had come, Dasarath was jubilant, like he's a giver of good fortune to the whole world. But his name can also, depending upon how you break his name, Vishva Amitra, because Vishwamitra was also known to utter terrible curses upon persons who he felt were in violation with standard behavior. So he had a reputation like that. But Dasarath, being the magnanimous king, received him in the first way, and recognizing his position as a most exalted Brahmana amongst Brahmanas, a superlative. Long story of Vishwamitra's life, but he was at long last granted the status of Brahmarshi or Brahma Rishi, a rishi amongst the Brahmanas, most exalted amongst the Brahmanas. And so Dasarath offered him a blank check, meaning he simply said, whatever it is that you have come for, consider it yours. You have come for some purpose. He didn't ask him what the purpose was. He simply said, whatever that purpose is, it's yours, just for the asking. Please let me know what it is that you would like. And Vishwamitra's response was jubilant, praising him, saying, these words are just appropriate for a member of the Ikshvaku dynasty. You have spoken properly. You're to be praised by those in the line that you're representing, O noble king. Now, because Vishwamitra knew that the question he was going to be asking, or the request he was going to be making, would tug at the sensitivities or the attachments of Dasarath for many reasons, which Dasarath then shares, his attachments. So he then right away, directly, describes the mission that he, in his Siddha ashram, later Vishwamitra gives the whole history of how the name Siddha ashram was arrived at. In the ashram where I reside, I've taken a vow to complete a particular sacrifice that takes 10 days, and it's meant for the benefit of the whole world. Unfortunately, at the end, on the final part of this yajna, two terrible personalities, gives their names, Maricha and Subahu, very crafty, very learned, very powerful. They come and defile the sacrificial arena. They appear in the sky and they throw down contaminated things, blood and stool, and destroys the whole sacrifice. Now, during a sacrifice, one is not to curse, and nor do I want to use my power to curse these two demons. So I've come to request that your son, Ram, come with me. So what Vishwamitra's intention is, before taking him to Mithila to perform this marriage ceremony, Swayamvar ceremony with Sita, he wants to establish the credential of Ram. The credential of Ram is unknown to the world. He's just a 12-year-old boy, a lad. But Vishwamitra knows his power, and he knows his power to protect him if worse came to worse. But no one else knows. So he wanted him specifically to kill Subahu and Maricha so he could complete the yajna. There's other things to be accomplished along the way. The deliverance of Ahalya and the killing of Tattaka. That's not mentioned in the conversation with Dasarath. It's just Maricha and Subahu. And Dasarath has his uh-oh moment. One of several. Just hearing the word Rakshasa is terrifying to many people. And my son, he's not even 16. No, that language is used specifically, it turns out, because for those who are Kshatriyas, although their prince, the son, may be very powerful and qualified and chivalrous and so forth, they're not to engage in combat until they're 16, and then at 16, a bell rings and they become suited for combat, but too young. He's not even 16. And Rakshasas that sound very formidable. So, he didn't say no, I'm not sending them, because he already said yes, but he's waffling. And Vishwamitra had anticipated this. So he had said prior to this waffling, I have all confidence in your son. It is he only who can defeat, because the king, Dasrath, he volunteers. I'll take my entire army. These sound formidable. Tell me about the names of these and their qualities and their ancestry and their lineage. So Vishwamitra gives the whole history right there in Ayodhya. Um, they're, they were cursed by Agastya to become Rakshasas, and their descendants from a lineage of Yakshas. Yakshas are very powerful. They have mystic powers, and they're great fighters. And he also then mentions they have some affiliation with Ravana. Now, how that affiliation with Ravana comes about goes something like this. After the detail gets really complicated, I'll keep it simple. But after Agastya was harassed by Tataka's husband, Sandhu, he burnt him to ashes with his eyes in mantra, just pile of ashes. And when Sunda, Tataka's husband, was killed that way, he was a demon, Tataka came to avenge his death. And she came with Maricha. And Tataka and Maricha, started to attack Agastya, raging, screaming. She was very powerful. Long story of how she became powerful. Powerful as 1,000 elephants. And Agastya just uttered a mantra. They stopped. And the mantra then said, Maricha, you become a Rakshasa. And he was already very powerful and so forth and so on. And Tataka, your beauty, because along with 1,000 elephants of strength, Tataka was very, very beautiful. You'll lose all your beauty. And you'll also becoming a night roving Rakshasi and terrible in feature. So that's how Tataka and Maricha, they wanted to take revenge against the death of Sunda and Agastya's behavior. And so they turned that forest into an uninhabitable place. All the rishis left, and they roamed at night and defiled everybody and everything. So they were ruling that forest, except for Vishwamitra and the sages that were staying at Siddha Ashram. So when the two boys, Subahu and Maricha, they in course of time made friendship with Ravana's mother's father, their Ravana's maternal grandfather, Malyavan. And Malyavan, having befriended with them, kind of, Ravana buddied up with them and supported their behavior of tormenting sages and making this uninhabitable forest and so on. So when Dasrath heard Ravana's name, the connection between these two, Subahu and Maricha and Ravana, it was, oh no. Ravana, I wouldn't want to fight Ravana. The demigods don't want to fight Ravana. And you want my son to go fight Ravana? Or those under his care? It's quite unreasonable. He's done his studies, and he knows something about military skill, but he doesn't know anything about warfare. He's inexperienced. Please permit me. It'll be a formidable challenge for me and my entire army, but I can go. But so why didn't he let Dasarath, because if it's just about killing Subahu and Maricha, that's not what it's about. It's about bringing Ram to victory, to the marriage with Sita. But he has to establish his credential to be eligible to take part in the eyes of Janaka and all the other kings. And to help persuade Dasarath, there's a very important verse that gets a lot of attention in commentary. And that important verse is a verse where Vishvamitra directly declares to Dasarath that your son is the personality of Godhead. There's one other place where that's spoken, and that's when Parashuram is confronting Ram on the way back from Mithila. There's these two verses where Ram's divinity is directly spoken. I'll read the translation. It's nice. I am aware that Ram is the supreme soul, and that his prowess is true. Even Vashishta of great prowess, and all those here situated in austerities know this. Maha Atmanaha. He's the supreme personality of Godhead. Now, that doesn't penetrate Dasarath, because it's not like Dasarath doesn't believe. It just doesn't penetrate. You know, he has great respect for Vashishta. He is a qualified Kshatriya. He's a pure personality. He honors the Brahmanas that are the qualified Brahmanas. So Vashishta knows, and Vishwamitra knows. And Dasarath isn't doubting him. It's just his affection as a father. He can't see his son that way. So it's kind of like water off a duck's back, or it doesn't go in. And so he's still backpedaling. He's still apprehensive. He's still seeing my delicate boy. He hasn't yet said no, but he already said yes. And now he's waffling or backpedaling or trying to make another arrangement, trying to get Vishwamitra to change his disposition. Well, Vishwamitra doesn't change his disposition. He's very focused. He wants victory for Ram. He wants to bring Ram and Sita together. He's very singularly focused. When Dasarath heard Vishwamitra say that he's the personality of Godhead, Dasarath fainted. He lost consciousness for one muhurta, for 48 minutes. And when he regained consciousness, he spoke another very celebrated verse. He speaks of his son as lotus-eyed, Rajiv, Lochana. In poetic language, a lotus is open during the day and closes at night. His lotus-eyed son the poetic imagery is not just his eyes are lotus-like, but he's just a young boy and he sleeps at night. And Rakshasas, they're very busy at night, and he'll be at risk. And another phrase that he uses is my son. Very significant. My Ram. My lotus-eyed Ram. It's possessive. And part of that possessive is his feeling towards Ram, but also his understanding of Ram's feelings towards him. There is this affinity, a transcendental affinity just like between Krishna and Nanda Maharaj, between Ram and Dasarath. So my son is a mutual my son. And And how is Ram going to survive being absent from me? He's never been absent from me. He's always with Lakshman and he's always with me. And it's sometimes described that the attachment for Dasarath, when Ram was away for a little while, he'd call Ram to come see him. So a messenger would go, find Ram. Ram would come before Dasarath. Yes, my dear father, what is it? His father would just smile and say, I just wanted to see you. Then he would take a few steps away and come back. I want to see you again. Very, very attached. Of course, in the case of Dasarath, it's a transcendental attachment. But Vishvamitra has another transcendental attachment. And that transcendental attachment is expanding the glories of Ram for the benefit of the world, not merely the benefit of his loving father, Dasarath. And he understands how important that is, and he wants to do it. And he's helping to remind Dasarath, as does Vashishta, how important it is to give the glorious association of Ram to others. So he tries again. Please let me go. Let me bring my entire army. Vashishta's reply, very short. You first promised me that you will fulfill my request, and now you want to break that promise. This is not befitting a person respectable in your dynasty. Please tell me definitively what you want to do, and if that's what you want to do, then I will leave the same way that I came, and Sukhi Bhava. May you be happy with your family. And he's angry. Vishvamitra. Fortunately, Vashishta is there and he intervenes. Now this is another important lesson. It's really good to have people you trust and who are wise, that understand situations that you're passing through, certainly if you're going to be a king, and be responsive to those persons. So Vashishta knows the power of Vishvamitra Muni and says to Dasarath like 10, 12 different things. Vishvamitra doesn't need Ram's help. Vishvamitra created a parallel universe. He has powers that are equal to that of Brahma. He doesn't need your help. He has all the celestial weapons that given to him by Lord Shiva. He can deploy all those weapons. He has no need of your son's help. He has come for your benefit, and he has come for the benefit of your son. He doesn't spell out how that benefit of his son will take place, but he says, your son will be protected just being in the presence of Vishvamitra. You need have no worry at all for his safety. And he will give those celestial weapons to your son. He will give his blessings and mercy to your son. Do yourself a favor and don't cross Vishvamitra when you have a big problem. Don't worry about the protection and well-being of your son. By the side of Vishvamitra, everything will be perfect. And as attached as he was to my son, because this is a material consciousness idea, I and mine, we know from scripture. And Dasarath is, of course, there's transcendental affection, but there's a material portion that if one has the association of saintly people, here Vashishta and Vishvamitra, both indicating the well-being of the world, then you can let go. of that, the material portion of attachment. No, he's a father and he wants to protect his son, but he'll be protected. He'll be victorious, I assure you. And the assurance of Vishishta makes it sufficient. And the rest of course, Ramayana continues with Dasrath giving his agreement. There's a small detail, and that is Ram and Lakshman are never separated. So Lakshman goes with Ram, and that's fine with Vishwamitra. It's not like three is a crowd. It's just fine. The glory of Ram will not be diminished by the presence of Lakshman. And so with the genuine, not now no longer reluctant blessings of Dasrath, he's convinced by both Vishwamitra and Vashishta. Now, here's a big contrast. How long, because one of his claims is for 60,000 years, I had no sons. And with great difficulty, I now have 4 sons. And he is waffling at the request. But in the case of Vasudeva and Devaki, he also had a long period of no sons, and then had sons. And here's the son number 8 after the first 6 sons were killed, and he's letting Krishna go. So it's Lila. It's instructive because there's events that have to play. And ultimately, the super soul is an expansion of Lord Ramachandra, the personality of Godhead, within the heart of each of these personalities. King Janak and Vishwamitra Muni and Shatananda and Dasarath and everybody. They're moving according to the indication of super soul because they're pure souls. And the victory of Ram is the goal. And so this whole orchestration, back to the starting point, victory, our victory, or others' victory. And a life of devotion is, in many cases, our victory is subordinate to the victory of others, and certainly the personality of Godhead, or our disciplic line. There are challenges before us, certainly in everyday life, but even the mountain of challenge is the difficulty of bringing into this world the message of Krishna Bhakti. In a world, just as we know, Prabhupada in his arrival prayer spoke, impossible. Dasratha was seeing mission impossible. Vishwamitra knew otherwise. Not only possible, it's certain. And he gave his assurances, which should be sufficient. But, it looked like mission impossible. So how are we to perform mission impossible? It takes faith in the disciplic line and ultimately the instruction of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu that this is to happen. It doesn't mean when you go forward, there aren't going to be obstacles or difficulties or challenges. You go forward with certainty of your victory will be the victory of the disciplic line. You can say our founder Acharya and those who he was representing, and ultimately Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, the personality of Godhead. And all success is certain. Whether the result looks like we're getting there, it may look for some time like we're hardly getting there. The success, this is one of Prabhupada's teachings, is our success is in our endeavor. There's a very nice discussion that one sannyasi recently shared with me. I'll just summarize it. Prabhupada it's a room conversation with Hari Sori, and Hari Sori is sharing the Mission Impossible message. how are these people? And Prabhupada's response was, I also felt like that when I came to your country, came to the Western countries. How is it possible? And with the mood of carrying out the mission of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, I had no expectation. I have no certainty what the outcome would be. But the endeavor was, he didn't use these words, the endeavor is the perfection. But let our efforts rest, we'll say, with our theme here, in service to others, in service to the personality of Godhead and those who are serving the personality of Godhead, service to the servants of the servants. And that's our life. And that's our victory. Param Vijayate, Shri Krishna Sankirtanam. So I hope that falls within our time limit. I know it's a little different with Zoom calls and classes in the temple room. There's usually a timekeeper pointing to their watch or the clock on the wall saying, finish up. So let's see if there's some discussion. I don't know exactly how this is going to be handled. I guess you can send a message to the chat box and one of our persons on this side can read out your message sent to the chat box if you'd like to do that. Pretty nice backdrop, huh? Looks like I'm outdoors. It's just a wall hanging. But it looks good. It often takes a little bit of time for online people to send in a message. So since there's silence right now, I'll invite, if there's a few people here, anybody here would like to raise a question or have some discussion on this topic.
So in the course of the discussion, Maharaj, you were mentioning a good king will take the advice of a person, a trustworthy person, and considers the inputs. I might not be a king, but still I find myself in situations that I need some good counseling and good advice.
Good.
So I should have a trustworthy person whom I can confide in confidence and receive the guidance and instructions. So also I find myself in a position where when I am sharing Krishna consciousness with others, that I have to do the same service of giving some guidance or inputs to other people that I'm interacting with. So it looks like trust is a key in that relationship.
That's a question?
Yeah.
Or is it a statement?
No, you need a confirmation for.
Well, trust is needed, and before trust is trustworthiness. Then comes trust.
Okay. And in that particular service, it looks like connecting to the topic, it's the victory of others and also victory of the Supreme Lord, even when I am performing that service. Because I am trying to help that person to get some valuable inputs for their situation in a way that is pleasing to the Supreme Lord. So is that a correct understanding of that service?
I'd like to modify that understanding of service a little bit. Twice you used the language giving inputs. And the modification of language is being an instrument to help that individual find their way by being a mirror, helping them to look at themselves and their situation, examples from scripture, because inputs might be direction giving as opposed to helping the person make wise decisions. Now, there are circumstances when giving suggestions direction wise may be appropriate. And this is my feeling, my understanding of a guidance giving person. It's a little bit like parenting. It's not the same, but a little bit like parenting is, or the giving guidance to newer persons, helping those persons to understand how to make wise decisions rather than making decisions for them or guiding them to the right decision, is helping them understand how to make wise decisions. Now, reference to scripture is a function because you have more access, more awareness of what scripture says in different circumstances. However, if the other person becomes too dependent upon you to, give direction left or right or, whatever, then they're not understanding how to make wise decisions. They're looking to someone who's the decision maker or the giving input person and become dependent upon the giving input person. We want people to become independently thoughtful, and one of the best ways to do that is to respect their capacity to be independently thoughtful and help them understand how to be independently thoughtful and make wise decisions. Not independent, but independently thoughtful. You can suggest, for example, you can suggest reading a certain section of the scripture. And after reading this certain section of the scripture, tell me what your thoughts are vis-a-vis, the circumstance you're in. Help them discover how to make wise decisions. So if, the giving inputs can mean that, but giving inputs can also mean giving direction, turn left or turn right. You had something? Yes?
Hare Krishna, Prabhu.
Hare Krishna.
Thank you for giving such a wonderful lecture. I have a two-part question.
Okay.
The first one is about Sita. So how can you shed a little bit a light about the origins of Sita Mata and how come she was found in a treasure box, and then Janaka took her as his daughter.
Let's do one at a time. You can
Okay.
before you go on to the second one.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
Is that it for the first one?
Yes.
Okay. There are different, as you know, there are different versions of Ramayana. And so there's different answers to that question, depending upon the version of Ramayana that you come across. So one of the versions of Ramayana says Sita, was Vedavati. Vedavati was accosted by Ravan in a forested place and grabbed her hair, and she judo chopped her hair and told, cursed Ravan, I will be born again and end up your destruction. So that's one idea, one version. Sita from, some say in a treasure box, some say just from the furrow of the plow. Some don't use the treasure box picture of things. But she came from the earth and she returned to the earth. That's a common one. So it's just a divine arrangement. She didn't take birth as living entities or children normally do. She was the goddess of fortune. Now, Vedavati, when she says to Ravan who she is, she's the Vedavati. She's the speaker of the Vedas, which is not exactly the goddess of fortune. So there's the goddess of fortune made her appearance that way to be the wife of the personality of Godhead, Lord Ramachandra. So by divine arrangement, she came from earth, Bhu Devi. That's another picture that Sri Vaishnavas like. Bhu Devi is one, along with in the personality of Godhead worship, Sri and Bhu, Sri Devi, Bhu Devi, are manifestations of the goddess of fortune. So she, some depictions have, she's Bhu Devi, the internal potency Bhu Devi, not the material Bhu Devi, but the original internal potency Bhu Devi, making her appearance that way to become betrothed to Ram. Depends on different versions of Ramayana and how they depict her origin.
Thank you, Prabhu. On different versions of Ramayana, so the Valmiki was the original witness for the all the events that happened in Rama and Sita's lives, and he documented that in Valmiki's his Ramayana.
Yes, correct.
And but the other Ramayanas, what were their timelines? They are pretty recent. So
No, some of them are not pretty recent. Some of them are directly from Puranas, compiled by Vyasadeva. There are some that are more recent, and there are some that are Puranic, history dating. And it does so. It's a little involved, but Valmiki was given empowerment by Lord Brahma that he would not only see the pastimes, all of them, I mean everything, but he would experience the feelings like Super Soul. He would know the hearts of the various personalities in Ram's Lila, like Super Soul. And thus he would be able to tell flawlessly everything. That doesn't, so that's gold standard, one way of saying. But there are other personalities that similarly had revelation. Doesn't, because Valmiki had revelation doesn't mean others cannot. And so we look to Vyasadeva as authoritative, whatever Vyasadeva compiled as Vyasadev's, that's gold standard 2. There's gold standard 1 and gold standard 2. But there's others that have intimate relationship with the personality of Godhead and have revelation of his pastimes. His pastimes and revelation of his pastimes are not time-bound. I'm with you. Sounds like you and I are on the same wavelength that says Valmiki Ramayana is the gold standard. And others just don't have that same gold standard because Valmiki is. But I have come to the point of accepting, as great acharyas have come to accept, there are other authentic versions of Ramayana. Here's a really nice example. In Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 9, when Shukadeva Goswami, who is as authoritative as you can get, is asked by Maharaj Parikshit to describe the pastimes of Ram, he says, you can look in the Bhagavatam, he says There are many versions of Ramayana. I'm only going to speak from the authorized ones. Meaning, at that time, there were many already existing authorized ones, and there were many unauthorized ones. What to speak of since then? So there's more than one authorized one, according to Shukadev. Here's a nice example. When Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was visiting in South India, he was doing his tour of South India. He went to, if you look on the map, where he was to where he went, way out of his way, he went to a particular place where there was a Ram Bhakta who constantly chanted Ram's name. There's a nice pastime described in Chaitanya Charitamrita. The Brahmin invited Chaitanya Mahaprabhu to have lunch at his home. He agreed. He said, I'll go perform my midday duties. He came back and there was nothing. So he asked the Brahmin, what's your intention? He said, just now Lakshman is in the forest gathering edibles and Sita will cook. So Lord Chaitanya understood this man is on another platform of bhakti. It's a spontaneous devotional platform. And it was going on in his mind, but it was going on. And so when the edibles came and he then prepared, so then he was fasting. After he had his lunch, Lord Chaitanya said, you have your lunch. He said, I'm fasting till death. Why? Because Sita's been kidnapped. Sita's been kidnapped by Ravan. How can I maintain my existence? I'm giving up my life. And Lord Chaitanya assured him, no, it's not possible that Sita can be touched by a demon. It's not possible. I assure you, Sita has not been kidnapped. So stop your fasting and take lunch. I'm going to sit here till you have lunch. So he did. Then you look on the map and Lord Chaitanya went way, 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 way in South India and found a Agni Purana or Kurma Purana, I think, copy where it describes that Maya Sita was taken by Ravan. And it was the Maya Sita that entered the fire, and the original Sita was given back to Ram. So she wasn't touched. So he had a copy made and went all the way back and gave that copy to the Brahmin. Said, see? Now that's not described in Valmiki Ramayana. What I just said, Lord Chaitanya said, and then found the Purana that confirms it. It's not in Valmiki Ramayana, but Lord Chaitanya accepted it. So how is it this or is it that? That's a question. Well, if there's different versions, how come? So there's different realizations, or one can say there's different cycles of the yugas, and in different cycles of the yugas, Ram appears and does it this way, and Ram appears and does it that way. That's another explanation. But if they're authorized, they're authorized. And if they're not authorized, they're not authorized. So how do you determine what's authorized? That's a good question. And so like Krishna says to Arjuna, or Arjuna says to Krishna, not only I'm declaring you're the personality of Godhead, but these great authorities. So there's measures of understanding what's authorized, not authorized. So rather than drilling down on that one, between you and me, let's say from me to you, there are other authorized versions besides Valmiki Ramayana. Gold standard. And there are other versions besides Valmiki Ramayana. And I don't have the qualification to say, this is authorized, that's not authorized. But they're great souls, acharyas, in disciplic line, that have accepted different versions. Lord Chaitanya being one, this particular reference from, if my memory serves me right, it's Kurma Purana. Okay.
So this was a wonderful answer that you gave me. Do you have this? The other Ramayanas, if you have, or you point us to that.
I'm not a Ramayana scholar, but I know persons that are Ramayana scholars, and they have, but they're in Sanskrit, and I don't read Sanskrit. But I could, after the class, I can give you the names of these other authorized Ramayanas, and then
Mm.
you have to find either the original Sanskrit and be a Sanskrit scholar that can read it properly, or find a qualified translation into whatever language you like, Hindi or English or
Mm.
whatever, because there are different translations from Sanskrit. It gets a little gray,
Mm.
not so black and white, even if you find it an authorized Ramayana. So best, between you and me, best is the explanation given by exalted acharyas.
Okay.
And
And
then we can know what's authorized and how to understand that which is authorized. And they even take the trouble of saying, here's a misunderstanding, and here's why it's a misunderstanding. This should be the correct understanding. Guided by acharyas, we're in safe zone. And just getting copies of books and reading, we can get bewildered.
so as long as I get guidance from you.
Okay.
So next question, the second question originally, which I wanted. So when you were narrating Vishwamitra actually coming to actually bring out the glory of Lord Rama. So this sounds like a mundane question, but just to put it to rest, so why does Lord Rama need Vishwamitra taking so much effort to come?
Oh, he
To act-
doesn't. He's giving him some service.
Yeah, that is acceptable.
I mean, Ron could go, finish Ravana in a flash. I'm getting animated here. When Vibhishan arrives and there's, Ram says to his ministers, what do you think? And they say, blah, blah, blah. And then he says, I've already accepted him. And Sugriva is hesitating. He said, but, he could be a traitor and he could do harm and, I don't trust him. Then Ram goes into this long thing saying, don't think that he can harm me. He said, I have not yet made up my mind to cross the ocean and destroy Ravan. But when I do, I don't need anybody's assistance. He said, with the tip of my little finger, I don't even need the other fingers. I don't even need the other parts of the finger. Just the tip of my little finger, I can destroy the whole of Lanka and the 1 trillion Rakshasa soldiers that live there. I don't need any help. Don't fear for my safety. Even if Vibhishan is a traitor. Even if he's Ravan in disguise. He's not even Vibhishan, it's Ravan in disguise. I accept him because he surrendered. So he's just giving other people some service to do. It's Lila. He said I could blow up the universe effortlessly. The whole universe is destroyed. I don't need anyone's help. That's his, opulence, his almightiness. But all this is Lila to give people, Vishwamitra, a chance to do some nice service, to arrange his marriage to his eternal consort.
Uh, Maharaj, when Sri Ram actually came back to Ayodhya in Pushpaka Viman,
Yeah.
it's generally said, Ravana had a Vimana. That was probably the only Vimana. But my confusion is, uh, Maharaj Dasharath had actually fought alongside the Devas against the um, Asuras.
Yes.
But
Yes.
so in outside of the realm of planet Earth, so he should be having a Vimana. Is it that's a logical conclusion? But is it
No.
written?
Not logical conclusion. Why?
No, that's
He got to where he got to somehow. He must have had a Vimana. That's the logic.
yes,
He got there somehow. It doesn't mean he had.
yeah,
This Pushpaka Vimana was a mystical thing. I mean, it didn't even have a steering wheel.
Tesla.
Just get in it, and the mind takes you wherever it takes you wherever the mind wants you to go, and it can become bigger or smaller. It's like it's a totally mystical
Mm.
entity. So how Dasrath got to a place where he was fighting with the demigods, I don't know of any information, but it doesn't mean necessarily had a Pushpaka Vimana. He got there somehow.
Mm.
Maybe the Devas descended and took him there. Who knows what?
Mm. Thank you, Prabhu.
Okay. Let's see if there's something online. Do we have something online? Yes? Nothing online. We'll take one more question live here and we'll call it a day.
Guru Maharaj, when Vishwamitra was asking Dashrath to send his son, Lord Ramchandra, with him, and Dashrath Maharaj is giving reasons, then you said that Vishwamitra said, okay, if you don't want to send, be happy with your family. So I was just thinking, like, no, is it sarcastically he's saying?
Yes,
and
it is. It is, exactly.
But he didn't mean any bad to
His
the other
family.
person. Yeah.
No, he's not saying, he's saying, you're a king. You've given your word and kings don't go against word. You're a member of the Ikshvaku dynasty and they keep their word. And if you're not going to be a noble person, just be happy with being an attached householder. But he's not an attached householder. He's not just an ordinary fellow. He's a noble person. It's like, it's sarcasm. Exactly. But he's not aspersions toward living a noble life and as a king with family and entourage and everything else. That's not it. Okay?
Yeah. So, in service to the pure devotees, so sometimes knowingly, unknowingly, we commit so many offenses and we may not please them. So, I'm just thinking that if it is displeasing, it doesn't mean that they're going to have something bad against me, right? Never wish.
Stay focused on your mission and don't worry too much. Stay focused on your mission. And there are persons that are guiding us in our mission, and take their help and stay connected like that.
Maharaj,
One more. Okay.
Why would we lose this opportunity? Guru Maharaj, so when we hear all this itihasa, so we see that such saintly persons actually giving out curses. So I was just, even though I accept and I said I go on with it. So in the back of my mind is,
Why are they cursing? They're supposed to be saintly people.
yes, why is it they still have a little bit of ego left, or
Yeah. Well,
and that
it depends. Let's say. Let's take the microphone off. In some cases, yes. When Durvasa Muni does the Durvasa Muni, it's coming from false ego. He's powerful like anything, but it's coming from false ego. Go to the other extreme. When Narada cursed Nala, Kuber, and Manigriva to become trees, it was a benediction. So commonly when sages curse, behind it is a benediction. It may not be explicit, but commonly that's the case. Now there's other cases where they just lose it. That happened with Vishwamitra before he was Muni. He was very powerful. And he gave left and right curses that depleted his power, but it wasn't coming from a pure consciousness place of benefiting the other persons. It was slap. It was a false ego program. So one may become powerful and misuse it. One may become powerful and properly use it. And sages are meant to properly use it, but it's possible to misuse it if one becomes powerful and there's some pinch of false ego. Thank you very much, Prabhupada Ki.